Hi all, the World Chess Championship is upon us, the first game starting today. I thought as part of the World Championship coverage of each game as it finishes, I would also look at historically interesting games. Now, in their very first encounter in the Corus tournament of 2010, Magnus Carlsen was just over 2800, 2810, and Fabiano was 2675, so significantly lower rated. The age difference, Magnus was 19 years old, and there's a 609-day gap between them, so that's 1 year, 8 months. That Fabiano Caruana is slightly younger than Magnus Carlsen. So let's see how they clashed here. E4 from Magnus. E5, we have knight f3, knight c6, and now Magnus plays bishop b5, the classic royal of pairs. a6, bishop a4, we have knight f6, d3, and now d6. c3, g6, so preparing to fianchetto the bishop. Knight b2, bishop g7, and now a very interesting move already from Magnus. Instead of the routine castling, which you might expect, in fact knight f1 has got other intentions, really interesting, dynamic, aggressive intentions. It's a move that I've first seen in the Steinitz game, so instead of castling to make sure that the knight is not inhibited, because once you castle you've used the f1 square and you have to move the rook. So it's actually a great use potentially of the f1 square at the moment while it's vacant. Black castles. Now bishop g5. So putting some pressure now on this, by pinning here, putting some pressure indirectly on the d5 square, which this knight can actually intensify the pressure on d5. And actually Fabiano plays d5 immediately, putting pressure on e4 potentially. We have queen e2, and now queen d6. Now Magnus actually voluntarily gives up the dark square bishop. Bishop takes. So is there going to be a lot of pressure on the light squares now? Knight e3, putting pressure on d5. Knight e7, bishop b3. Again, more pressure being put on d5. So after giving up that dark square bishop, Magnus is playing on the light squares now. And in fact here, after c6, he plays a very interesting move indeed. Guess what white plays if I give you 5 seconds? Okay, Magnus plays h4. So another use of not casting is to activate this rook with aggressive intent. We have bishop e6 being played. Now knight g5 is actually the idea not to play h5. There might be the possibility of black playing g5 on h5 anyway. It's not a guarantee to open up the h file, but this use of the h pawn to play knight g5 is very interesting. Bishop d7, now rook d1, rook a8, queen f3, and you can see that a lot of white's pieces are indirectly looking at d5. It's almost like a d5 overprotection strategy. h6, we have now the amazing knight c4 trying to deflect the queen away from the f6 bishop. Yeah, if the knight had gone back to h3, then actually bishop g7, this position, black would actually have a small edge here, maybe even a significant edge. So this is a very important technical move to play to try and drive the queen away from the bishop. We have very resourceful moves now. D takes, D takes. Now if the queen goes back, then there's queen takes f6. So queen c7, queen takes f6 gives white a big advantage here. For example, this is fatal. That will be mating on h8. So that knight cannot be taken. So knight d5 is the resourceful reply. And now this knight goes back. Now h5. So with h5, black actually threatens here bishop g4. So white has to do something about this. Otherwise, after taking the knight, then bishop g4 will be skewering the queen and the rook with an advantage for black. White is not yet regaining the piece. Queen g3. So an amazing in-between move here. Bishop g4 is played, hitting the rook. There are actually some neat tricks involved here. If white plays f3, there's a subtle weakness of this diagonal And can you see what black can actually play to exploit that in this position? If I give you 5 seconds. It ticks 2 major boxes with one move. Queen e7, it unpins the knight and also creates a battery for bishop takes h4 to pin the queen to the king. So this would be really vicious. It would be a terrible way to lose to Fabiano if this was played f3. Just the move f3 would be so destructive. C takes, bishop takes h4, yeah. And on knight f2, knight f4, if white takes that bishop here, can you see what black plays in this position? Okay, bishop takes h4 is a really crushing tactic, because after rook takes, there's queen takes h4 with the idea of knight takes g2 check, and black has a big advantage here, the exchange up. So this is a really, really naughty, provocative move that Magnus had to bypass tactically and avoid playing f3. Bishop takes h4, hitting the queen. Another alternative here was actually queen e7, just putting pressure on h4. So for example here, bishop takes h4, black should be doing fine there. So rook d2, bishop takes h4 here though, is another little trick being used. Queen f6, hitting the queen, getting out of that pin. So black is actually doing quite well now in this game continuation. So Fabiano, even though only in inverted commas 26, 60 or thereabouts, is holding his own in this very first encounter they had in 2010 at this point in the game. We see knight g5, c5 fixing down white's doubled pawns, f3 the bishop drops back, bishop a4 we have king g7, and now a pair of rooks come off, b4, but this is leaving white's pawns pretty shattered. We have the invasive move rather, rook d3. So now we have treble pawns on the board, but now rook takes c3. Another alternative, black could have actually considered knight d7 it seems. This position is very nice actually for black. So rook takes c3 is also nice for black of course. We have bishop b3 though. This does scoop up the f7 pawn. Here, knight takes f7, a5. This bishop is trying to be lured away from the king. Rook c1, that's taken. And now a4, trying to drag the bishop away from protecting the knight. Bishop c4, b5. Knight d6, counter-attacking the bishop. B takes, knight takes. Now this endgame is very nice for black actually. h4, knight b6. Knight h5, there's a clear and imminent danger with the king here. It's quite a long way to try and defend against this pawn. So if this pawn is taken out, this is a very fast outside pass pawn. We have knight takes c4 with the idea of getting the knight back to rescue the situation. King f6, this might have been an important inaccuracy. It seems knight f4 offering e5 gives actually good winning prospects to Fabiano here. For example, knight takes g2. This situation with the knight pacified means that actually the other pawn over here is very, very dangerous. This scenario, black's got a big advantage. If we look at this again in this continuation, this is a critical continuation. If, for example, instead of king e3, king f1, then knight d3 is very good, trying to deflect the knight away from protecting into the h-pawn. And now getting the a-pawn actually leads black to a very advantageous scenario like this, where black is actually winning. So that does seem to be an important inaccuracy, king f6. Now we have king d2, knight f4, king e3, knight takes g2. It seems as though Magnus might have enough now to hold the draw. He forcibly wins that a-pawn. That's one thing, less thing to worry about, taking off that a-pawn. And now, yeah, even though black is temporarily, okay, here a pawn up, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's going to be a peaceful resolution now. So knight a4, they agreed a draw. Now in this tournament, Magnus actually won the tournament, and his next FIDE rating was was considered to be likely to be the second highest in chess history. So this is in 2010. Magnus was already phenomenal on the FIDE rating list. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this historic look at their first major encounter, so non-blitz in a classical time control, the major Weekend Z, the Corus tournament of 2010. If you like this game analysis video and want more, etc., please become a member at chessbowl.net, which you should see a box on the top left soon. You can play against other YouTubers. You can check analysis of this historical game and other games done recently on the improved menu learned from the masters. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes, all appreciated. Thanks very much.